Yeah, it doesn't
in
make
my
sense.
view,
That's true.
and even the political commentators are sort of saying, we have no idea what he's doing. I do apologise. I kind of messed up with the stream.
What's
It's only
wrong?
started to record. I don't know. I didn't
Are you
click on the
sure? It
thing,
says
but
31
it's
minutes.
live.
It's it says
Okay,
it's been
but
live for
perhaps it
31
is.
minutes.
I didn't
It
click
says
on the
on air.
thing. Oh, good. Okay. But I couldn't
Yeah, yeah.
see it live, so
Yeah.
maybe I messed up by trying this new
No,
thing.
hopefully not. It
So
seems to be it says going on for half an hour.
okay, okay. Um, well, we don't know. I mean, he's just doing this, making all these, uh, putting on such a show, and nobody really knowing, what he's trying to do, and I think it's very disturbing. You know,
Mm.
um, putting on this show. I mean, he should be in control, but he isn't, and we know, he's probably being threatened and isolated, and whatever. And well, I mean, it would be tragic if World War III broke out. And
Yeah, it
and
would
I'm
be.
saying, because the Quran actually has principles of international relations and principles of warfare, and if everybody kind of at least realized what they were and paid lip service to it, the world would be a safer place. Because I mean, Trump has been saying things like morality is what my mind perceives it to be,
Yeah,
and
he said that.
and
Yeah,
we got,
yeah.
yeah, he said that, and people went, "Oh, how shocking!" And then you think that's how everybody thinks,
Mm,
right? They think morality is what they think is moral, and
mm.
obviously people don't agree.
Yeah, yeah.
And it is this conceptual disorder that is really causing all this chaos and confusion, because people don't, people won't even say, but won't even discuss morality, because they already know they won't agree on so many things. So they just pretend that everybody who talks about morality is a nice person, and better.
Oh, I
I mean,
see.
that's how they think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But eventually, we will have to sort of say, well, what God commands is moral, and what He forbids is immoral, and have to leave it at that, because humans cannot agree with each other on the subject, other
Yeah.
than to appeal to a higher authority, and that's where religion comes in. And I don't see even how even an atheist can say, oh, religion has no use, because all these atheists will say, oh, religion is a form of mind control, and therefore bad. But I would say, yeah,
Yeah,
we
I
all need to
think
be controlled.
atheism only works for teenagers or young people who haven't thought it through. Because if you've spent some time thinking about it, you would realize that morality is a complex problem, and you will notice that everybody's disagreeing with each other about just about everything. But yeah, when you're kind of young, you think you've figured out something new that nobody else, just because you're new to the whole scene and yourself. Yeah, so it's kind of silly. There aren't. I don't know. You don't see too many um, atheists who are particularly old and serious about it. They kind of just go quiet. I think they turned out. They eventually decide to be agnostic or something because it's not defensible.
Well, yeah, so they call themselves agnostic, and I think, when you get to a certain age, you should have made up your mind after, living, 50, 60, 70 years, to think, well, maybe we do need, somebody saying what the rules are, that isn't another, fallible and mortal man.
Yeah, and you're only
So yeah, you can.
agnostic for political reasons. Is that right? It's not because you haven't made your mind
Well,
up.
I'm saying, obviously nobody alive knows whether God or the afterlife exists, but you can work out, even as an atheist, that religion, gives Jews their status and identity, and ditto, Muslims and
Oh, I
Christians.
thought the point you were making was that by saying you're agnostic is saying you're not sure about stuff, and you're
I'm
bad.
saying it can never be known. while we live, whether God exists or not, because the people who want to believe in God will just believe in God and not be open to arguments, and the people who don't want to believe in God will just say, well, you can't prove it, can you?
So,
So
okay,
we
so
won't
what's your
believe.
position? Your position, not your personal position. Are you saying being atheist is a silly position, or are you saying being agnostic is a silly position? Because agnostic means you don't know. And you were saying a
Well,
few
I was
seconds ago
told.
that by 30, 40, was it 40 years old, you should know something by then.
Well, if you're past middle age,
Okay.
you should have observed that a lot of the arguments about religion and politics are basically about morality,
Okay.
and you can't really measure the effectiveness of any system of morality without using religion, right? Because people can argue about what is moral and what isn't, but the only way to measure it is to say, well, who's the most powerful religious group? It appears to be Christians, or but maybe not, because these Christians are always complaining about Jews controlling them. So maybe Jews are the higher status, and Muslims also complain about Jews running everything. So I guess maybe Jews are the highest status religion, even though they are small in number.
Interesting point of view. Yeah. I mean, maybe
So,
maybe
so I'm
they
just
they are the ones who seem to be controlling most things, and Muslims are not particularly controlling most things. So there might be an argument for that. For this moment in time, the Muslims were controlling the world at an earlier point in time. So, yeah, I think you've got an argument, I guess, in that sense.
Yeah, so I'm just relying on objective statements that people are not going to argue about, like, well, Christians and Jews, Christians and Muslims do complain about Jews controlling everything. So maybe these Gentile religions are not that high status. And then I guess Christians, do hate and fear Muslims because they think, Muslims are rising up and going to take over, and so even if Christians appear to be the biggest and most powerful religious group, they are, in decline.
Hmm.
And that is, what is causing so much Islamophobia and tension and hatred between, all the peoples in the world.
Yeah, and I mean, just to
But what I'm
clarify
saying,
clarify my point of view, I mean, I do agree through your logic that since a lot of people, including a lot of Muslims, say that Jews are controlling the world, then there's something about Jews that make them powerful, maybe their religion. So I can agree with that to that extent right now. But also in Islamic teachings, like I mentioned earlier on, the caliphate system was destined or prophesied to be corrupted, and there'll be this stage which I think we're currently in, which is when Prophet Muhammad said the faith would have left the earth, which is Islam. The mosques would have been full, says this particular saying, but faith would have left the earth. So I think it's not Islam that is at fault, it's the people that's at fault. And if they come back to Islam, which people are doing, then Islam's going to come back to regain its strength and dominance in the world, which I think it's on its way to happening. You can see it happening. And you can say,
yes, I
would you
mean,
say Judaism, or I would say Judaism, maybe the Zionist approach to Judaism is falling apart? Would you say that or not?
well, I mean, I've been trying to explain to people that there's more than one form of Zionism.
Oh,
So we know that the Zionist Jews, they have no ability to even get back their own territory unless supported by a powerful empire, i.e., the British and the American Empire. They wouldn't be able to do a single thing without without the Anglo-American Empire. So, whatever power they have has been conferred on them by Gentiles, by a powerful Gentile empire. and you would expect Christians and Muslims to be obsessed about Jews because their holy book is forever going on about the Jews, and they're probably wondering why those Jews haven't converted to
It's
their
not the only
wonderful
thing the
religion.
Quran is about, but yeah, it does mention them. Yeah, it's part of, I think, a narrative of how things started. It's like there was Abraham, and then there was these different prophets, and prophet. It's basically telling the story that Prophet Muhammad was not the first prophet. So why would you reject prophets? And guidance from God, and it gives that narrative, and the Jewish religion is an important part of that narrative. That's all.
Yeah, yes, and if I remember correctly, the Quran mentions Moses most of all. Out of all the prophets of God,
Oh,
Moses is mentioned more times even than Muhammad. Maybe I got this
yeah, I
wrong,
mean, Prophet
but
Muhammad's only
I mean,
mentioned 4 times. That doesn't say that he's less important, but in name, I think. In name, but I think you could check the references, like talking to Prophet Muhammad will be throughout the Holy Quran. So, but in name, you're right. Yeah.
yeah,
Actually, I don't know
and I
about.
don't think.
I know Muhammad was only mentioned 4 times, which is Prophet Muhammad was mentioned 4 times. So that's not many times, and loads of other prophets were pretty mentioned more times, I guess, Jesus included.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's much of an indication, but I think Moses is mentioned so many times is because the Torah represented a quantum leap for morality, because it's a book supposed to be from God,
Hmm.
right, given to the Jews, and then the Muslims said, "Oh, hey, we can do better than
I'm
that.
not
We can
okay.
we can make our Quran, the final and the best revelation for all of humanity.
I don't think that's what
Conceptually,
Muslims believe.
you bettered
What
the
Muslims
Jews."
believe is
Sorry.
there's an evolution. So the Quran talks about how um, prophets were sent throughout time, all people, all time. So it wasn't just the Jews that had a book. I believe the Hindus had a book called the Vedas. Buddhists had inscriptions in stones, whatever. And so it wasn't like the Muslims just thought one day we need a better book. It's an evolution. So in the cave, there are cavemen who are given guidance, right? But cavemen wouldn't be given guidance on not doing usury because they didn't even have money. They just had, you kill not the dinosaur, but you kill the saber-toothed tiger and eat it, and that's it. Do you know what I mean? The point is that there needs to be an evolution. You can't have all these complex laws that Muslims had when they were cavemen and they had nothing to make laws about.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can understand how contentious people can be. So God said no murder, and then you can imagine people saying, "Is it murder if you execute someone?"
Hmm.
And then the answer is no. Is it murder if you kill somebody in battle? The answer is no. Is it murder if you defend yourself from somebody who's going to kill you, and all these nuances,
Hmm.
um, you know, from just one word.
Yeah.
All these exceptions to these rules, and then further exceptions to these rules, etc., etc. Because humans are complicated and live complicated lives. But I think that the most important thing is the law, because if you can't have law if you don't have the written word, right?
Yeah.
Because it's only when does the law say this, and then you have to go back to the law and look at the wording, and decide whether it means what it means, whether it applies to you, and whatever. And 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 I don't see how you can escape the idea of a supreme authority, because I think any civilized country will have a supreme court. I mean, because they implicitly accept that if you start your legal action in a lower court, the lower court judges might not get it right, and then you go to a high court, and then you go to an appeal court, and then finally go to the supreme court.
Hmm.
And maybe even then you won't get justice. So you think, well, in theory, if everything were working properly, God would give me this justice that was denied me in my Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So I think that's how we're meant to think. Um, and obviously, if the Torah represents law from God, given to the Jews, then people, Gentiles might say, well, does it apply to us? And then they wondered for a bit, and then the Quran was revealed, and then the Gentiles had their own version, and I would argue, it is a better version because it doesn't contain so many horrible death penalties for minor offences, such as breaking the Sabbath. Well, that they're supposed to be executed for breaking the Sabbath, for practicing idolatry, for blasphemy. And worse, the worst of it is that they're supposed to be beheaded for being a citizen of a city that has gone astray, which is called Nidakat in Hebrew, and it's like, well, most of these Jews live in Europe, which is Christendom, and arguably,
Isn't that gone astray? They have pride marches. I mean, pride, whatever you call it.
yeah.
So,
And I'm saying, Israel is basically an American colony, and that is too horrible for them to acknowledge, because if that is the case, then Jews were basically used by the Americans to go and people their colony of Israel, and to fight and die for American imperial interests. So that they are not to be envied at all.
I can
And if
see.
they have nuclear weapons,
I can see India. By the way, I have to finish on the dot because I've got a lesson straight after this to teach. I can see India, bro, agrees with my last live stream with E. Michael Jones. He's making a lot of interesting comments. Can you see them? His comments.
oh yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, maybe I appreciate it when people message and make their comments, especially if they're
Go on.
thoughtful.
You'd like to talk about his comments? Please carry on. Please
Sure.
do.
So he just watched the last live stream between me, the Ahmadi, and I'm glad he's calling me Ahmadi because that's what it really represents what I believe in, and E. Michael Jones. The issue with E. Michael Jones is his refusal to acknowledge race and the plight of white European men of various European nations, all of whom are under collective attack. I'm not sure if he refuses to recognize that they're under attack. I think he maybe. Do you think he refuses to recognize that white people are under attack? I mean, I certainly realize they're under. I don't call it under attack. My big thing to all people is don't point the finger, point the thumb, which means the problem starts with you. Your weakness as a group is because you lack morality, and which is something he agrees with. Do you think? What do you think, Claire? Do you think Michael Jones is refusing to recognize they're under attack? I think he talks about it.
Well, to be fair to Mike, he actually warned. He pointed out to Jared Taylor, who is known for representing white nationalist interests, and he said, white nationalists have no rights, but we Catholics still have some rights. So, and then, after that, Christian nationalism came into being. And so I'm thinking these white nationalists just sort of understood what he was saying and said, we can't be calling ourselves white nationalists. We have to be calling ourselves Christian nationalists to upgrade our status, or people will just, hammer us into submission and call us Nazis and anti-Semites and racists, and then we'll never be able to, make our point. So I think they've taken on board what he was saying, and to be fair to all the Abrahamic religions, they're all obliged to accept converts. So if you believe in the Abrahamic God, you're not actually allowed to be racist. But obviously, white people want it, in their white homelands to to be the majority. And I'm saying, well, then you have to marry and be responsible married parents and ensure that your children
I
are
mean, Judaism is
properly
a bit
parented
different.
and
They
educated.
have to be
Sorry?
racist, but maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like Jesus was racist, but in a maybe good way because God told him that not to talk to people outside the Jewish tribes. But that's just because that was his remit. That's all. Um, yeah.
Well, they can support racist policies like apartheid, but it didn't work in South Africa. You know,
Yeah, I mean, there's different kind of racism, I guess, but yeah, but I think that racism doesn't apply, doesn't work anymore because it was in a time where there weren't much mixing of tribes. Um, yeah. Oh, anyway, so what was this other thing that and Ahmadi is correct to argue for these young men to find their way. Absolutely, people like in the West, people are so confused, and it's common. It's a common understanding that Westerners are totally confused. I watched two. I watched.
because they have no religion.
Yeah. I love what because I'm a big fan of different movies, and one of the famous kind of clips I remember from one of my favorite movies, Blood Diamond, where there's this guy who's keep chasing money his whole life, and he basically dies at the end chasing this big diamond. There's an African guy who goes, "Oh, when you're rich, will you then have a family? Like, will you have a family then?" And this is the big problem that Westerners suffer from at the moment. And he goes, "No, I'm not sure." And then why won't you? And it's like this white guy who's potentially going to have money. He just doesn't know what to do with his life, even if he had all the money that he needed. And that joke only makes sense if people get it, and people do get that people are really confused and lost. So, totally agree with Indio Bro with that women Westerners need to find direction in their life, absolutely, and then they'll be able to compete with Muslims if that's what you want to do. But I think it's better just to work with them. But anyway, um, what else is there? The fact that he had to avoid using the white with EMJ was painful. EMJ is much good to give. Yeah, I think it's just too simplification at some point. I have been using the term white because my regular viewers understand what I'm talking about. But yeah, I've kind of tried to give a more deep. Yeah, I still use just like right now. I've been using the term white because it's simple, and most of the kind of viewers we have understand what we're talking about, but a lot of people don't. And then there's another guy jumping in, objective ethics. Most of Western universities have been heavily indoctrinated, totally agree, into liberal politics, which claim that it's somehow impossible to be racist against straight white males. So, yeah, I would agree that there has been indoctrination for a long time, all kinds, actually. Like, for example, the London School of Economics have been taught a certain kind of economic theory so they can carry on doing, usury and all sorts of all sorts of economic policies that just don't work. So they can carry on doing what they want. I agree with you. The last, but I think there's a different kind of subtle indoctrination that university goers suffer from, but that's another thing. But like lack of thinking, do you know what I mean? Like when you absorb whatever rubbish you're told and you repeat it, and if you repeat it correctly, you get a pat on the back. Jordan Peterson used to say that there's studies that say that there's a negative correlation with relating creativity and university degrees. Basically, it's the opposite of thinking for yourself. Is what modern universities are about. So I do think that modern universities teach you how to be a good slave. Last comment is I agree with you, Ahmadi. The issue is that, especially with the US, there's never been any ethnogenesis. I wonder what that means. Can you help me with that? Do you know what that means?
Well, I don't know. I mean, what does it? No, I don't know. I'd actually have to look it up. I mean, it's basically a white male anxiety.
Hmm.
And the only way to remain dominant as a racial group is to have more children than any other racial group,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's the only way to do it. You don't need
Have more
to be a
children,
rocket scientist.
but also children that believe in what you believe in. Otherwise, you'll have children and they'll give up on what you believe in, and it would have no effect. And they'll just have children
Yeah,
with Muslims or become Muslims or whatever. You know what I mean?
yeah, because there's always this kind of inertia that most children will stay with the religion of mum and dad because they don't want to upset mum and dad and be the odd one
Is
out.
that the
So they
inertia?
will
I think
stay.
that's not true. I think Christians are becoming atheists and Muslims are staying Muslims.
Well, then we have to ask ourselves, who is a Christian? Just because you live in England doesn't mean you're Church of England.
Hmm.
If you never go to church, if you
But if they
never even
identify
say you
as
believe in.
something else other than Christian, which is what's happening, because slowly but surely Christianity is becoming a minority religion. Oh, sorry, it was already a minority religion, and it's not getting any better. I think actually, I say it's not getting better. There was a bit of a rise for a short while recently. Is that right? People coming back to Christianity because they realized the atheist experiment didn't help them, and they didn't want to become Muslims because that's like foreign to them. Is that right? I think so. So, but
Well,
anyway,
they're
yeah.
trying to weaponize Christianity. I think the
Hmm.
American Pope is a CIA power move to kind of merge Catholicism with Protestantism
Hmm.
and allow America to control the interpretation of
Yeah, that's
Christianity.
what's his
Maybe
name said is being weapon. Not he said white is being weaponized, but maybe Christianity. Yeah, I would say Christianity is being weaponized certainly. And the last thing was ethnogenesis. The last comment he's explaining is in the case would be assimilation of all people to European descent in America as a kind of American race or collective people akin to Mexican Bronze race. Okay, cool. I mean, good luck with that. I've been supporting people if that's what they want, but in an international or what would you call it? An international village that we live in, everything's connected. It's hard for that to work. Um, but what I do say
there's
is,
already.
I don't want white people to die out. Is what's happening slowly because they don't have any.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, nobody wants that, but it's their own government who doesn't care about them. But I mean, talking about American race, there's actually a term for it. It's called heritage American.
Hmm. It's nice
It's
to have people
when they
from
say,
different countries, different backgrounds, whatever. It's interesting, but it's also nice to have different kinds of food. And like people don't want British food. It's horrible. It's like mashy peas or something. So it's nice to mix things up. For people who don't know, the favorite food in England is Indian food or aka Pakistani food. But yeah. Anyway, I've got to go. Great talking to
okay,
everybody. It was interesting.
thank you for coming.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, talk to you next time. Um, I have so many things to say now because of the comments. So if this is a white nationalist thing, oh, white people are being replaced, it's like you can't use a color to be your religion. Race cannot be your religion, and we already know it's failed. So, once upon a time in Europe, when everyone was white and everyone was Christian, it didn't stop white Christian people from killing each other. And then when they crossed the Atlantic and moved to America, they didn't stop. These Christians didn't stop killing each other. And if World War III breaks out, it will be caused by these pesky Christians again. So, neither white nor Christianity can be your religion because it's failed. Now, another example of trying to weaponize race was done by the Slavs called Pan-Slavism. And I looked it up yesterday to refresh my memory about what I learned as a schoolgirl about Pan-Slavism, and it's basically all these Slavs in the Balkans, who were understandably fed up with being bossed around by the Catholics and the Turks. So they wanted this thing called Pan-Slavism, and then they realized that if they wanted Pan-Slavism, Russia is going to dominate the agenda. And so they decided they don't want to be, they didn't want Pan-Slavism anymore. And we know how much the Poles hate the Russians. So, fundamentally, you cannot use race as your religion. And, a more objective way of classifying race would be to use the IC race codes that the British police use, which is IC1 white, IC2 Mediterranean, IC3 black, IC4 brown, and IC6 Arab. And the thing is, then you get Arab and Mediterranean kind of conflated with each other. So really, the only four kinds of four broad groups or four broad racial groups. And you need to understand that a colour is no basis for any code of behaviour, and therefore you need to choose a religion. And I know that white nationalists, they actually have their religion, and it is anti-Semitism, racism, and Islamophobia. So you'll have to, clear that out with your spring cleaning, because if you keep blaming Jews, hating Muslims, and being racist, you will not be you will not be taken seriously by anyone, including members of your own race who don't want to be associated with low-status, angry, bitter males who are considered by middle-class women to be unmarriageable. And that's why you can't use these ideas. You can say you wish that the world were white, and and that Jews were gone and Muslims were gone, but you can keep stating this as wishes, but as policies, you're just not going to get anywhere. So you might as well, accept the situation, but try to survive within it. And no group of people can survive without adopting a religion. I mean, why do people even bother with a religion? Because it's restrictive, isn't it? It's all about, telling them to go to church or pray 5 times or, observe the Sabbath and whatever. And these are the organized religions. And the organized religions are the most powerful religions of all. So, if you're thinking, oh, I'm going to be a Hindu or a Buddhist, well, forget it. Why would you want to be, low status brown and yellow people? I mean, even China does not, China disdains to be identified with any of the Eastern religions. It tolerates them. Of course, it tolerates Hindus and Buddhists and, Christians, but only under the umbrella of its imperial ideology, and that is currently Marxism. So liberalism is the imperial ideology of the West, tolerating all these other low-status religions, such as Judaism, Christianity, and all the others. I mean, just understand the role of religion. So in America, there is the kind of religion you have is basically social clubs. It's not even a religion in the sense that you honestly believe in it and practice it, because when people go to church, it's to be with other people like them who will, tolerate their presence and maybe be grateful for it. If you want to be, if you want to arrange the flowers and do stuff in the church. And then you have to decide, do you want to go to one of those mega churches, or do you want to go to a little church where everyone knows your name? And I'm saying these social club religions of America are no good. It's not going to maintain any kind of morality. So if you want the laws changed, you still have to think in terms of political activism, which is about changing the law. And if enough of the laws in your country need to be changed, then you need to be changing the political system. And I'm saying representative democracy is the problem, which you probably won't accept, and therefore you have to consider a one-party theocracy. And I know you just won't be able to accept that because you just want your little political tribes, and so you can feel safe with each other. But it'll get nowhere because you'll never get elected, and people will, well, they will just piss and shit on you as low status, unmarriageable men. So you have to up your game. And I know that some white nationalists on whom the penny has dropped has decided to adopt Christian nationalism. But I'm saying, since the founding fathers have separated the church from their state, it doesn't matter which church you go to on a Sunday, or if you go to a different one this Sunday, because it's not going to change your politics, and you still don't get it. You don't understand your own political and legal system. You won't read the farewell speech of George Washington because I guess the ideas are a bit complicated, the sentences are a bit long. So you're not going to read it, and you're not going to understand your own history, and you won't understand that the American Republic was a reaction and against and a rejection of Christianity and monarchy. So I guess Americans will continue to think that the founding fathers were Jewish because they were Freemasons, or some Jewish conspiracy crap like that. I would say the founding fathers were proto-Muslim in that they wanted a constitutional republic that supported freedom of belief and freedom of expression, and as supported by chapter 2, verse 256 of the Quran, that says there is no compulsion in religion, in belief. Truth stands clear from error. So I guess I'm just dealing with Americans and Europeans who don't understand their own history, and they don't understand their own history because they were never taught church history. And they were never taught church history because their governments didn't want them to question the religion associated with Europeans. But in fact, Christianity has been failing since the decline and fall of Rome. So when Constantine adopted Christianity in the 4th century, it was to protect, to defend his divine right to rule. He was, after all, an absolute monarch, but it didn't because of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. And Rome was supposed to have fallen in 476. And then it continued to fail. So the remnant of the Roman Empire, called the Roman Catholic Church, thought, well, we still have a viable business model. We'll go and convert the barbarian kings of Europe and get them to give us their stuff by promising to defend their divine right to rule if we by submitting to the Pope in Rome. And because these barbarian kings were a bit stupid, they couldn't even read, they agreed because they understood Rome, the Roman Catholic Church, to be from the eternal city that is Rome, and therefore being the center of European civilization, they would know how best to rule or help these barbarian kings rule their kingdom as the king's conscience. And so the Archbishop of Canterbury, in the case of England, would be somebody loyal to the Pope, sent to be the king's conscience and governor. So some of you may have heard of Thomas Becket, who was murdered. He was assassinated in Canterbury Cathedral when Henry II said, "Oh, will no one rid me of this turbulent priest?" Because Thomas Becket was a friend of Henry, and he thought it would be a good thing if Thomas Becket became Archbishop of Canterbury. But once he became Archbishop of Canterbury, he was more loyal to the Pope than he was to his friend Henry, and so was being difficult about a number of things. Anyway, eventually, when the kings of England could take no more bossing around from the Pope, Henry VIII broke from Rome. And there was also the Reformation on the continent, started by Martin Luther. And basically, Europe was in uproar for about 300 years or something, fighting each other about what kind of Christian to be. And sadly, nobody cares. No 21st century Westerner cares about who won the wars of the Reformation. They just want to be middle class and Christian, and they think being middle class and Christian means going to church. But it's not. It's not really going to help them with their government or politics. And basically, these men are neurotic and mostly talk nonsense and don't understand their own history and don't want to hear it from me, obviously. So let's just go back to a few of the things that India Bro wrote. He talks about white men under collective attack. Well, I would say nobody's really attacking you. You've just lost your immune system, and the immune system I'm referring to was patriarchy, and you've lost it and you don't want to bring it back because you don't want to marry your women or become responsible married fathers, and you don't want to change the law to enable you to do these things. So I guess the problem is not about to be addressed soon. And if you do want to restore patriarchy, you would have to get yourself a religion or a legal system, such as secular Quranism, to restore the patriarchy. But I don't think you people can be bothered. You would rather die, basically, and your civilization become extinct. Now, masculine identity is basically accepting the gender roles dictated by marriage. So it would be the role of women to make men want to be men by giving them some respect as protectors and providers, and bite their tongue a bit, I guess. And men, in order to be truly masculine, have to defend patriarchal moral values. And by this I mean social conservatism, and by this I mean the privileging of married parents over non-parents, and treating unmarried parents as sex offenders. That's the only way to make things clear to most people about the moral and social hierarchy. of patriarchy. But I think most people are anti-natalists, and they're being seduced by the environmentalists into thinking that humanity's a blot on the landscape, and it would be better for Mother Nature if most of us disappeared. Now, racism is, obviously, it's not nice if you're the victim of, negative racism, but there can be positive racism when people think, oh, you're so good at this thing, because you're this race or that race. And obviously, if they treat you better because of your race, then of course you'll be happy that people are being racist. But racism can also mean that you are privileging certain races over others. But I don't think you can stop people from, having their own views about, certain races being, good at stuff. Like, automatically assuming that that Jews are, always smarter than Gentiles, or whatever it is that, some stereotype that people have of you. So, ethnogenesis, I've already pointed out, that there is now a term for white people in North America, and it is to call them, heritage Americans, or in the UK it would be IC1. You got the number one slot, so what's the problem? I don't know why you're talking about Bronze Age. I suppose you want to, show yourself to be ancient, as ancient as the Jews or something. Yes, universities are indoctrination centers for the young. So, look, I get it that white people want to impose apartheid if they could, but it's not going to happen, is it? Because really, your government is against you, because it is the business organizations who donate campaign funds to your political parties that want cheap immigrant labor. And your politicians will always be submitting to the person that, how does it go? He who pays the piper calls the tune. The payer of the piper would be business organizations. The tune is cheap immigrant labor to cut costs and increase profits. Yes. The problem with Christianity is that Christians cannot agree, and they've forgotten their burnt and bloody history, and why they still hate each other. And it doesn't take that much for them to start, claiming superiority over each other, once they start, rubbing each other up the wrong way. Well, what I'm anticipating is the Anglo-American Empire has kind of merged Catholicism with Anglicanism, as you saw in the visit of Charles and Camilla to the Vatican and being welcomed by the American Pope. And so, the impression is that, oh, we Christians are great again because we are now united. And if you've heard of an organization called ARC, which is Alliance of Responsible Citizens, Jordan Peterson was a speaker, and a lot of neocons were there, and they came to London, and were trying to get members of the metropolitan elite, the white people who still want to be considered upper middle class, to get with the program. But it's basically anti-Trump, anti-Muslim, and pro neocon wars. So this is how I see Christianity being weaponized, and obviously with the right incentives. We can let's make America great again by being more Christian, and why don't we become a Christian republic and take Christianity seriously, because we don't like those Jews and Muslims, do we? We don't like them. And when we become officially in a Christian republic, we can treat them as second-class citizens, or worse. And a Christian amendment has already been passed in American Samoa, so it's not something that that I've conjured out of my imagination. It has, in fact, taken place, and I think the campaign to make America a Christian republic began with after the American Civil War, probably because they thought Americans weren't being Christian enough, and therefore fought these terrible wars with each other that they clearly haven't gotten over yet. But if Americans had already been Muslim, it wouldn't have been an issue at all, because instinctively Muslims, when they disagree with each other, they'd have to go back to their scripture. And I guess if all these Americans had been Muslim, they one of the states who wanted to carry on with slavery would say, well, God did not forbid slavery in either the Torah or the Quran. And the Quran does tell Muslims to free slaves, in an act of repentance or something. And it's like, well, we can't free slaves if we don't have them, can we? So we are meant to have slaves. All these arguments could have been used. But the point was, it wasn't really about slavery, because I saw the movie Lincoln, 3 hours long, and I heard Lincoln saying, if I could keep the Union and free all the slaves, I would, or if I could keep the Union and maintain, keep slavery going, I would. Okay, I'll have to check on this, but him, Lincoln was basically saying the Union meant more to him than, whether slavery was legal or illegal. And so it's kind of like, that Hotel California song, right? You can check out, but you can never leave. And that should be no surprise. If you're already a nation, you're not going to have, this region here and that region there saying we're going to go our own way. You're going to say, no, it's not allowed. And you can see from the Lincoln Memorial that Lincoln has the biggest statue of all, because he is truly the father of the nation in the sense that he united America and enabled an America strong enough to, acquire, to go all the way to the West Coast, and then to fight a war with the Mexicans, and then kick out the Spanish, and then declare WASP supremacy. I'm no American historian, but I think my narrative is basically correct, isn't it? Now, objective morality says he is successful, but, well, maybe you are the exception. And a lot of people who, say, I've done okay, but, maybe others will not have your exceptional qualities. And they need, clear rules to say, don't become an alcoholic, don't steal, don't kill, don't end up in jail and destroy your life. And, the whole point of these laws is to, stop us from doing the things that we want to do that would lead us to a sticky end. And if enough of our group, our society, our fellow citizens do this thing, then we'll become a failed state, won't we? So these are the safety rails that religion provides. Telling us not to, commit adultery and be gay, and because if we're gay, then we're not going to become responsible married parents, will we? So, this is something to consider. I mean, most people do things without really thinking about it. It just feels good. Everybody's doing it, so why can't I? Yeah, this is how the herd goes. Maybe the herd should be, going in the right direction, or maybe pause to think if they're going in the right direction. But we can tell America is not going in a good direction. I mean, if I were American, I would be angered and dismayed. You actually voted for a president who promised no more neocon wars, and what's he doing? I mean, there's something terribly wrong with your system if your politicians can just keep tricking you and breaking their promises. So what's the point of democracy then? Foreign policy, even though most people don't care, because as I was saying, most people don't even understand their own history. So why the hell would they bother to understand the history of countries they would never dream of visiting? They're not going to do that. And for this reason, we have to trust our politicians to make wise decisions about foreign relations and military policy. And the great thing about the Quran is that it says it says only defensive wars allowed, which is not to say that Islam forbids imperial wars, because it says, well, you can conquer non-Muslim countries and exact jizya from them. So I'm certainly not going to say Islam is not an imperial religion, because like Christianity, Islam is an imperial religion. And one of the reasons why imperial religions are civic nationalists is because, of course, they have to not be fighting everyone for not following their religion. It's like you follow whatever religion you want, as long as you pay your taxes or your tribute, then we'll leave you alone. So obviously, defensive wars and imperial wars are two different military propositions. So it's very easy to want to defend your territory if somebody's invading you, but it's a different thing if you're sent to some country you've never heard of to fight and kill people you don't even know and have never heard of. So they are two different kinds of campaigns, two different kinds of military campaigns. And therefore, your media will have to make you, hate the Chinese, hate the Russians, hate the Iranians, and make you think they deserve to be bombed and invaded, etc. Because otherwise, you just wouldn't want to do it. Okay, thank you for putting me right about the Bronze Race and the Bronze Age. The mestizo population that erodes. Okay, well, so we can see that race mixing actually can create a new race and a new ethnic identity, such as the Creoles. Oh, really? I didn't know that ARC is funded by the Abu Dhabi Royals. Why can't I highlight? Well, I didn't know that. That's interesting. Why would they do such a thing? Why would the Abu Dhabi Royals support and fund Islamophobia? Answer me this. In India, bro, why? So you want all these different groups to intermarry and have. Okay, I'm not really interested in that. I really don't think race is really the problem. It's sharing the same beliefs and having the same values and agreeing to the same codes of behavior. That is, then you can get along with Venusians and Martians, because as long as you obey the rules, then it doesn't really matter what they look like. And I think the people is that the trouble with a lot of shallow thinking people is that they see things, they see people, foreigners, they don't like them, they notice that these foreigners are look different to the kind of people they used to see. I mean, obviously, responding to visual cues, if we are lower animals are key to survival, and obviously not all strangers are friendly, but the only way we can live peacefully together is for the law to be keeping the peace, and for the social and moral hierarchy to be perceived to be fair enough, and then everything. I mean, you can kind of make people look more uniform by having some kind of uniform, like the mouse suit. Not that I'm suggesting you'll wear a mouse suit, but you can. I think clothes designers can create a kind of aesthetic male and female dress code that could be considered pleasing, just by looking at it from afar. So I think that is not the end of the world, and then it wouldn't matter too much that people are not the same color, and also probably a lot of immigrants would go home um, if it were possible for them to make a decent living going back home. And I'm afraid America has a policy of keeping certain, many countries poor and in a failed state. Like Libya, like Iraq, like Afghanistan, so they can shit and piss on them and say, oh look, they're like that because they're not a liberal democracy. But then liberal democracy is not working particularly well for Americans and Europeans. Yes, I agree. Christians don't like Christians, but I'm saying if you could just the 13 principles of Judaism, I just think they're fair enough. I mean, if you're going to believe in God and the afterlife and, a moral God that dispenses justice, the 13 principles of Judaism are good enough. And you don't even have to be Jewish. It's sort of like, well, Christians and Muslims already accept the existence of the Torah and Jews. So if they could accept, I'll read it out to you. 13 principles of Judaism. Yeah, I also recommend that the Muslims just adopt it because, they argue with each other about all kinds of stupid nonsense. Because I guess they have nothing better to do. They could be asking Jews to join them in calling out the idolatry of Christianity, but they don't seem to want to do that. They prefer to argue endlessly with each other about irrelevant things like spirits and sacrifice and really, really dumb things that make you think Muslims are probably a bit retarded. Okay, 13 principles of faith summarized. 1. There is a God. 2. There is one God. 3. God has no physical body. 4. God is eternal. 5. Only God may be worshipped. 6. Prophecy. God communicates with humans. 7. Moses was the greatest of the prophets. 8. Torah comes from God. I mean, okay, so if you're Muslim, you probably want to say, you could say, Moses was the greatest of the prophets, and Muhammad, the final prophet of God, right? They could say that. 8, it says Torah comes from God, and I guess Muslims would say Torah and Quran come from God. And then 9, the Torah is the authentic word of God and may not be changed. And then I guess Muslims would say the Torah and the Quran is the authentic word of God and may not be changed. It's not that hard. 10, God is aware of all our deeds. 11, God rewards the righteous and punishes the wicked in the afterlife or through reincarnation, presumably. 12, the Messiah will come. 13, the dead will be resurrected. So there you go. It's so easy, but, of course, nobody listens to me. Okay, I will, look up this thing you mentioned about William Dungy and Joseph Spencer. What does it? Objective ethics says, I don't consider myself to be exceptional, but I do agree that people do seem to be confused about how to live a good life. Self-respect is all you need, but you need to be virtuous to attain this. So this is why, I keep going on about minimum moral standards. I mean, obviously, the ideal is that you're perfect. You never do anything wrong. You never think evil of anyone. You never speak evil, blah, 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 blah. But rules are made to be broken. So, and of course, this is true of God when he issued his commandments. He knew that people would want to worship other gods and want to blaspheme and murder and blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, I just don't see what the problem is. So you have these rules, and it's like a line in the middle of the road. You have to drive on the right side of the road, and if you have an accident and it was discovered that you were driving on the wrong side of the road, well, then you're in deep shit, aren't you? Because you were wrong to begin with. You weren't even supposed to be on that side of the road when the accident happened. So just think of rules as the line in the middle of the road, drivers or even non-drivers. So So if you think of these laws of God as safety rails, like everybody, oh, okay, maybe skiing, you don't want to be skiing off-piste, do you? If you're just an amateur, you need to be skiing on, the green runs, when you can do your snowplow without, hurting anyone. Despite the dogma, there are many examples in Islamic history where one Muslim faction invaded another Muslim faction. Yeah, okay. But you already know that, they're not as warlike as these Christians. They didn't start 2 world wars. They didn't fight a continental wars of religion. And in any case, all religions have something to say about sex and violence and law and war. Yes, of course, there's going to be a power struggle when somebody powerful dies, right? As for the Sunni and Shiite schism, I think it's basically racial. I guess the Persians got tired of being lorded over by the Arabs. So they said, we're going to have our kind of Islam that is different to yours. But these are just, historic and political, rather like the filioque of the Orthodox Church, which pertains to the monarchical Trinity, as opposed to the egalitarian Christian Trinity. But really, it's sort of, they have a political argument, and then they find a theological reason to say that the other side are heretics. So this is basically the problem. But I'm saying, if you have a religion as a group or a nation, then you're going to be able to resolve all these culture war problems. And obviously you have to change your political system unless you still want to carry on voting, even though it hasn't done anything for you. And in fact, George Washington warned all those years ago that Americans must not have political parties. So I will read what he said about political parties, because I know most of you won't even look at it. And also the Quran says, do not divide your religion into sects, creating unnecessary division, exploited by your internal and external enemies. Okay, so I will give you this link in case you want to read it yourself. Yeah. That's why I'm so keen on the First Amendment. I mean, if you have to have a theocracy, you want a theocracy that actually affirms the First Amendment, right? You don't want a theocracy that says idolaters will be executed, blasphemers will be executed, breakers of the Sabbath will be executed. You want you wanted to say, yeah, you believe whatever you like, but you have to obey the law. So now I will read what Washington said. In the vast and storied history of this country, this has ever There has only been one president who did not represent a political party, George Washington. Every man since who has occupied that prestigious position has been elected to represent not only the people, but the platform and policies of a political party. When President George Washington left public office, he cautioned the nation not to divide themselves into political parties. In his farewell address, he stated that the spirit of the party serves only to distract the public councils and enfeeble the public administration. It agitates a community with ill-founded jealousies and false alarms, kindles the animosity of one part against another, foments occasionally riot and insurrection. Was he able to see into the future and the division his beloved nation would face in the years to come? Perhaps not, but he certainly saw with clarity the dangers of partisanship in this American experiment. In his administration, he attempted to form a government that was above partisan ties and petty squabbles, but that was not to be. Why was George Washington opposed to the creation of political parties? Division in his cabinet. The dangers of political party tension was played out in the microcosm of Washington's own cabinet. In the years of his presidency, Thomas Jefferson, his Secretary of State, and Alexander Hamilton, his Secretary of the Treasury, vehemently disagreed with each other on a number of issues that arose in the administration. Hamilton vocally advocated for centralized government power, whereas Jefferson preferred for government power to be as close to the people as possible, rather than held in the hands of an elite few. Their animosity towards one another and their ideas created tension and hardship in the first administration, and Washington saw how potentially dangerous the creation of political parties would be, not only for future administrations, but also for the nation as a whole. Division in the nation. In a republic such as ours, the people must seek the interests of the country over their own. Washington foresaw how the formation of political parties would devastatingly tamper with America's ability to see members of the other party as fellow citizens rather than political enemies. He obviously foresaw the Trump derangement syndrome. To that effect, he wrote, the alternative domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension, which in different ages and countries has perpetrated the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism. But this leads at length to a more formal and permanent despotism. The disorders and miseries which result gradually incline the minds of men to seek security and repose in the absolute power of an individual, a king. And sooner or later, the chief of some prevailing faction, more able or more fortunate than his competitors, turns this disposition to the purposes of his own elevation on the ruins of public liberty. The division of the nation that Washington foretold has undoubtedly come to pass, though this is not a new or even surprising revelation. Our nation has been bitterly divided before, even to the point of a bloody civil war. As we consider how best to move forward as a nation, perhaps it is worth considering heeding this voice from our past, whose worries were proven right over time. However, political parties may now and then answer popular ends, they are likely in the course of time and things to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion. Yes, Thomas Jefferson was right about usury. Right? You have to have an Islamic banking system. What would be the problem? You ban usury, and in a stroke, you can default on your debts as a government and as individuals. If you've repaid the principal, you can just default on it, on your debts. Why can't you do that? And if you do it in the name of Sharia, then you will have this moral authority. Otherwise, you'll just be, people who don't repay your debts, right? All the answers to your problems are in the Quran. Plato believed that philosophers should be the leaders of society, not religious leaders or political partisans. Well, he did write the Republic, and but rather inconsistently, he was talking about a philosopher king. So how can there be a king in a republic? So I guess Plato was a bit confused. And anyway, the idea of a caliph, which is not a monarch, even though Muslims over their 1400 years of history have got themselves a bit confused. So this is a problem of absolute monarchy, and I will now quote Lord Acton, who said, "Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely." And I would add that absolute monarchy is absolutely corrupt. So the problem is absolute monarchy, and the continuing problem is people who just don't see a problem with having a king. Because they think of kings as romantic figures. They kind of want to worship, a man like themselves, right? And that is the whole point of having a king. You think, he's so powerful, he's so above us, and and they worship somebody who probably knows less about things than themselves, who, probably aren't that nice, who are isolated from society. And certainly the British monarch is, he's in this very peculiar position of not even enjoying his First Amendment rights. And for this reason, the monarchy should be abolished. And with it, I won't abolish the Church of England, but it would have to be disestablished. And then Britain would no longer be, I suppose it would still be the birthplace of Anglicanism, but it wouldn't any longer be officially Christian. All right, I have spoken for nearly 2 hours. I hope I can rescue the stream, because I suspect that the first half hour of my conversation with Khalid was not being streamed, though it seems to be recording from the beginning. So maybe I can fiddle around with it and give you the benefit of the complete stream. I don't know, but thank you all for coming. I hope some of this has been useful, and talk to you again before too long.